I was going to visit my husband in the hospital when a nurse stopped me in the hallway and whispered, "Ma'am, your daughter-in-law was here last night." I walked into room 307 and saw the IV bag changed. The color was different. Someone wanted to keep him from waking up. Now, if you enjoyed this story, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments what details made your jaw drop. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to see the exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you there. There are moments in life when everything changes in a second, when what you thought was solid crumbles beneath your feet. Mine came in the hallway of Santa Rosa Hospital at 9 p.m. when a nurse stopped me before entering room 307. "Mrs. Amelia," she whispered, looking sideways like someone afraid of being discovered. "Your daughter-in-law was here last night." I froze. My heart skipped a beat that I can still feel as I tell you this. "Diana, what time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The nurse pressed her lips together. There were dark circles under her eyes, deep. Her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. It was obvious she'd worked too many hours in a row. Around 3 a.m., she came in with a key I don't know where she got it from. It wasn't on the visitor's log. The air escaped from my lungs. 40 years of marriage had taught me to read between the lines. 40 years of building a textile empire from scratch with Henry had given me an instinct for detecting when something wasn't right. And this didn't add up at all. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to mutter. She looked nervously at the floor. Her fingers trembled slightly as she laced them together in front of her. "Because she changed the IV bag and I didn't receive any medical orders to do so." The world stopped. I pushed open the door to room 307 with trembling hands. The smell of disinfectant hit me first. That aroma that gets into your clothes and never goes away. The light in the hallway barely illuminated my husband's silhouette in that hospital bed that seemed to swallow him whole. Henry had been unconscious for 5 days. 5 days since a stroke had laid him down in the middle of the office, in front of his employees, in front of the documents he had obsessively reviewed over the past few weeks. 5 days in which I had slept in that uncomfortable chair next to him, praying to the Virgin of Guadalupe to open his eyes. 5 days clinging to the hope that the man who had been my companion, my business partner, my everything, would return to me. I approached the bed slowly. The sound of the heart monitor marked a steady, reassuring rhythm, but my eyes went straight to the IV bag hanging from the metal post. And then I saw it. The fluid had a different hue, very subtle, but different. It wasn't the transparent, crystalline one it always was. There was something slightly yellowish about it, as if someone had dissolved something inside. My knees weakened. I held on to the bed rail, feeling the cold metal creeping up my arms. I looked at Henry's face, so still, so pale. His gray brows, which I had always found distinct, now seemed whiter against his ashen skin. "What's happening?" I whispered into the darkness of the room. But deep down, a part of me already knew. A part of me that had ignored signs for months, maybe years, finally woke up screaming. Diana, my daughter-in-law, my son Michael's wife, the woman who came into our family 8 years ago with a perfect smile and sweet words, but whose eyes never quite smiled when she looked at me. "What were you doing in this room at 3 a.m? Why did you change the IV bag?" I staggered out of the room. The nurse was still there, waiting. Now I understood why. She, too, had seen something. She, too, knew something was terribly wrong. "You're new on the night shift," I asked her, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been here for 3 weeks, so I know this isn't normal." I leaned against the hallway wall. A doctor ran past us into another room. A gurney rolled near us. Hospital life continued, while mine fell apart. "Do you have cameras?" It was the only thing I could think to ask. She shook her head, but then hesitated. "In the hallways. Yes. No, in the rooms." Something is something, I thought. "Thank you." I looked at her ID. "Thank you, Lisa Carter." She doesn't know what it means that she told me this. She nodded, but I saw fear in her eyes, fear of the consequences of having dared to speak. I didn't know it at the time, but that fear was more than justified. I went back into the room. This time, I turned on the light. I needed to see everything, examine everything. The 4th bag, the tube that connected to Henry's arm, the perfectly placed IV. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but I knew it wasn't. I sat down in that chair that knew every complaint of its broken springs by heart. I took Henry's cold hand in mine and squeezed it. "What did you see, my love?" I whispered. "What did you discover that made you feel like this?" Because now I understood. Henry hadn't had a stroke by chance, not at 68 years old, being in perfect shape, taking care of himself as he did. Something or someone had brought him to that point, and now someone didn't want him to wake up. My phone vibrated in my purse. It was a text from Michael. "Mom, are you still in the hospital? You should rest now. I can stay tonight." I stared at that message for a long time. My son, my firstborn, the child I had held in my arms, the young man I had sent to college, the man I had put in charge of part of the family business. How much did he know? How involved was he? I didn't answer the message. Instead, I dialed a number I had saved for years and never thought I'd use. "Dr. Samuel Harris." "This is Amelia Roberts, wife of Henry Roberts, the patient in 307. I need you to do me a favor first thing tomorrow morning. I need you to analyze the contents of the IV bag that's connected to my husband, and I need no one, absolutely no one, to know that we're doing this." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Amelia, is there anything I should know?" "There will be soon, doctor. For now, I just need you to trust me." I hung up before he could ask any more questions. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in that chair, holding Henry's hand, watching that IV bag as if my life depended on it. Because maybe it wasn't my life that hung in the balance. It was his. And someone in my own family wanted to cut it off. If this story grips you as much as it pained me to live through it, subscribe to the channel, because what comes next is just the beginning of a nightmare I never imagined living inside my own blood. But I still didn't know the worst. I still didn't know how long this had been happening before my eyes and how much I had ignored for love of my son. Dr. Samuel Harris arrived at 6 a.m. before shift change. He carried a black briefcase and an expression that told me he understood the urgency without any need for explanations. He extracted a sample of the serum while I stood guard at the door. My hands were sweating. Every step in the hallway made me jump. "In 2 hours, you'll have the results, Mrs. Amelia. I'll call you directly on your cell phone." I nodded, wordlessly. What could I say? Thank you for helping me find out if my family is poisoning my husband? I stood there by the window, watching the sunrise over Puebla. The city was waking up, oblivious to my torment. The street vendors were already setting up their stalls. The smell of freshly baked bread rose from the bakery on the corner. Everything was normal out there, but in my world, nothing would ever be the same. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to remember, because I needed to understand how I had gotten here, how a family we had built with so much love had become this. Henry and I met in 1985. I was barely 23 years old and working as a seamstress in a textile factory. He was the son of the owner, but not one of those who spend their time partying and spending their inheritance. Henry arrived at 5 a.m. before everyone else. He checked every machine and knew every employee by name. We fell in love amid bolts of fabric and the noise of industrial machinery. His father was opposed at first. I wasn't his kind, he said, but Henry stood up for me. He chose me, and together we proved that love can move mountains. When his father died in 1990, we inherited a bankrupt factory and debts of 800,000 pesos. Everyone gave up on us, but we worked day and night. I designed, he sold. I managed, he negotiated. In 10 years, we built the business. In 20, we had 3 commercial locations in different cities. Today, that empire is worth 47 million pesos. 47 million that we built with calloused hands and sleepless nights. We had 3 children. Michael arrived first in 1983 before we got married, then Lauren, and finally Ryan. All 3 grew up watching our hard work. All 3 promised to continue the legacy. But life has strange ways of twisting plans. Lauren fell in love with a Spaniard and moved to Barcelona 12 years ago. Ryan got a job at a Canadian oil company and lives in Calgary. They call every week, sending photos of the grandchildren, but they're far away. So far away that sometimes I feel like I've lost them. Only Michael stayed, my firstborn, my oldest son, the one who swore never to abandon us. We put him in charge of administrative management 5 years ago. We trusted him. We gave him access to the accounts, the suppliers, everything, because he was our son, because we thought no one would take better care of the family business than our own flesh and blood. And then Diana arrived. He met her at a textile business conference in Guadalajara. She was working as an events assistant. She was 28 years old, 15 younger than Michael. She was beautiful, he couldn't deny that. Waist-length black hair, green eyes that seemed to see right through you, a smile that could light up or freeze depending on her mood. At first, I tried to welcome her. I organized a family meal, gave her a rosary blessed by the priest. I even offered to teach her traditional family recipes. But she always found subtle ways to reject me. She was late to meetings. She forgot to tell us about important events. When I spoke, she looked at her phone and Michael. Michael changed. He stopped visiting us on Sundays. He no longer asked for business advice. When we came to their house, Diana always had an excuse to leave. Family dinners became tense, filled with awkward silences. Henry noticed. He tried to talk to Michael several times, but our son became defensive. "I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I have my own family now," as if having a wife meant forgetting where you came from. Things got worse 2 years ago. Henry arrived one night, pale, holding a manila envelope. He locked himself in his study for hours. When he came out, his eyes were red. "What happened?" I asked, scared. "We'll talk later, Amelia." Now I need to think. The next day, he went to the notary. He only changed the will without telling me what he changed. When I complained, he hugged me tightly. "Trust me, I'm protecting what we built together. I should have insisted more. I should have forced him to explain. But I thought we would have time. I thought when he was ready, he would tell me. I never imagined time would run out so soon." My phone vibrated. It was Dr. Samuel Harris. My heart raced. My fingers trembled as I swiped across the screen. "Mrs. Amelia, I need to see you now in my office." He didn't say anything else. There was no need to. I left the room almost running. I ran down the stairs because I couldn't wait for the elevator. I arrived at his office breathless. He closed the door. His face was a mask of professional concern, but I saw something else in his eyes. Alarm, perhaps even fear. The fourth contains benzodiazepines, a considerable dose. I held on to the desk, my legs unresponsive. What does that mean? It means someone is deliberately sedating your husband, keeping his nervous system depressed, preventing him from waking up. The room spun. How long has this been going on? He reviewed some papers, ran some calculations based on his blood levels. Days, perhaps from the beginning. From the beginning, someone had been poisoning Henry from day one, and I, his wife of 40 years, had been sitting next to him without realizing it. "Is there anything else?" the doctor continued. I reviewed his chart. Your husband's stroke was brought on by extreme stress. Something had shaken him deeply days before. "What did you see, Henry? What did you discover that made you feel this way? And more importantly, who doesn't want you to tell it?" I left that office with a truth that burned inside me. My family hid secrets, secrets dark enough to kill. And I was about to open a box I perhaps should have left closed, but there was no turning back. Because when you discover that your own flesh and blood is capable of betraying you, you have to decide how far you're willing to go for the truth. I returned to room 307 with legs of jelly, but with a steely determination I didn't even know I had. That's the problem. When you're pushed to the limit, you discover what you're really made of. And I was made of 40 years of fighting alongside a man who now couldn't defend himself. I sat down in that worn chair and took out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but no longer from fear. It was rage, a cold rage that rose from my stomach and clouded my vision. I started searching for Diana Moore, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had entered my family with that white lace dress and that smile that promised respect and unity. I opened her Facebook. I'm not normally one of those mothers-in-law who spy on social media, but this wasn't normal anymore. None of this was. I scrolled through her profile, photos in expensive restaurants, photos at the gym, selfies with friends I'd never met. And then something stopped me in my tracks. A photo from 6 months ago. Diana in front of the counter of a large pharmacy, one of those that sells everything. She was holding a bag and smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Preparing my natural remedies for the family. Natural health, family wellness, natural remedies." I enlarged the image. Behind it, on the counter, I could see a box. I couldn't read the full name, but I could make out the letters SEPAM. My heart spun. I kept scrolling, more photos. A post from a year ago where she shared an article about medicinal plants that help you sleep better. Another where she talked about the importance of alternative medicine. Since when had Diana become interested in this? I closed Facebook and Googled her name. I needed to know more, and what I found made my blood run cold. Diana had studied nursing for 3 years at the Autonomous University of Puebla from 2012 to 2015, but she never finished her final year. She never earned her degree. She never practiced. Why? Nobody told me this? I called Lauren. My daughter answered on the second ring, her voice sleepy from the time difference. "Mom, are you okay? It's 4 a.m. here." "Lauren, did you know that Diana studied nursing?" Silence. Long. Too long. "Mom, why are you asking that now?" "Answer me," she sighed. I heard movement, probably getting out of bed so as not to wake her husband. Yes, I knew. Michael told me when they started dating. He said she'd dropped out of college because it wasn't her thing. Why does it matter? I closed my eyes. The headache was starting to pound in my temples. "And did it never seem strange to you that she never mentioned it?" "Mom," Lauren's voice became cautious. "What's really going on?" "Michael called me yesterday saying you were acting paranoid at the hospital." Of course he had. Of course he was already controlling the narrative. "Your father didn't have a normal stroke, Lauren. Someone is giving him something to keep him asleep. Mom, please, listen to yourself." "Do you think Michael?" "I don't know what to believe. I only know what I know." I hung up before hearing any more. I couldn't handle my own children's disbelief. Not now, when every minute counted. I called the hospital and asked to speak to the director of nursing. A woman with a firm voice answered me. "Mrs. Roberts, how can I help you?" "I need to see the visitor log for room 307, all the visits for the last 5 days. That's confidential. My husband is in that room. I have the right." A sigh. I hear typing on the computer. "Let me see. Your son Michael has come every day between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. His daughter-in-law Diana," my stomach tightened. "Yes, her." "How many times?" "According to the official record, twice, on the 2nd and 4th, and unofficially," an awkward silence on the other end. "I don't understand the question, ma'am." "Yes, you do. The cameras in the hallway. I want to see them. That requires a warrant or probable cause. A nurse saw her enter last night without a record. That's reason enough." More silence. Then a lower voice. "I'd have to make a formal request, and it will take time." I didn't have time. Henry didn't have time. I hung up and stared at my husband. His chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. The monitor beeped constantly. He seemed steady, but I knew the truth. Every hour with that drug in his system was an hour closer to not waking up. My phone rang, number unknown. "Yes, Mrs. Amelia, it's Lisa, the nurse from last night." Her voice sounded tense, scared. "Are you okay?" "They called me into the office this morning. They said I made mistakes on my shift, that I reported things without evidence. They suspended me." My stomach sank. Suspended. Why? "Someone complained about me, someone influential, and I think I know who." It had to be Diana. Somehow she found out that Lisa had warned me. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. This is my fault." "No," she interrupted me. "This is the fault of whoever's doing something wrong. Listen, before they kicked me out, I saved something. I have the recordings from the hallway cameras for the last 5 days on a USB flash drive." I jumped up from my chair. "Where are you?" "Hospital cafeteria, table in the back. I'm wearing a red cap." I arrived in less than 3 minutes. Lisa was there, slumped in her chair, with dark circles under her eyes that were deeper than the night before. When she saw me, she took a small USB drive out of her bag and slid it across the table. "I don't know if it's any use, but everything is there. Every entry, every exit, every late-night visit that shouldn't have happened." I held the USB drive like it was gold. Maybe it was. Maybe it was the only proof I had. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You've already lost your job. Could you just leave?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because my mom died 2 years ago in a hospital. The doctors said it was sudden cardiac arrest, but I know it wasn't. My sister-in-law was the only one who visited her at night, and when Mom died, we found out she had changed her will a week before. It was all my brother's. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. No one believed me. Everyone said I was crazy with grief. But I know what I saw. And when I saw his daughter-in-law come in last night with that key, with that attitude, I recognized the same look, the same urgency. I took her hand on the table. It was cold. "Thank you, Lisa. You don't know what this means. Just promise me one thing, Mrs. Amelia. If you discover I'm right, don't let them get away with it, because sometimes justice requires someone to fight for it." I left that cafeteria with the USB flash drive clutched in my fist. I didn't know what I would find in those recordings, but something told me that after watching them, there would be no turning back, because some truths, once discovered, change everything forever. I arrived home for the first time in 5 days, the house Henry and I bought 30 years ago, the one we remodeled together, where we raised our children, where we celebrated Christmases and birthdays. Now it felt empty, cold, as if it knew something terrible was about to be revealed. I turned on the computer with trembling hands, inserted the USB, and when those videos started playing, I realized that my life, as I knew it, was over. Because there are things you can't unsee once you've seen them, and what appeared on that screen was going to destroy my family or save it. The first video began to play. Date: October 16th, 2:47 a.m., to the third-floor hallway of the hospital, dimly lit by the emergency lights. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Just the empty hallway, the shine of the freshly mopped floor, the medicine cart parked against the wall. Then she appeared. Diana walked quickly, pressed against the wall, looking both ways. She was wearing dark jeans and a hoodie. None of the perfect makeup she always wore, none of the elegance she boasted on social media. She looked like what she was, someone who didn't want to be seen. She reached the door of room 307, took something out of her pocket, a key. She inserted it into the lock with precise movements, as if she'd done it before, as if she knew exactly how to open it without making a sound. She walked in. The door closed behind her. 4 minutes later, she left. She walked even faster toward the elevator and disappeared. I felt nauseous. I had to pause the video and take a deep breath. My hands were sweating over the mouse. What had she done in those 4 minutes? I opened the second file. Date: October 17th, 3:15 a.m. Same scene, Diana entering. This time, she was 6 minutes inside. When she came out, she adjusted her sweatshirt and looked directly at the camera for a second. Her eyes glowed strangely in the fluorescent light, cold, calculating. It wasn't the look of someone visiting a sick relative. It was the look of someone executing a plan. The third video almost killed me. Date: October 18th, 2:33 a.m. This time, she wasn't alone. Michael appeared first in the hallway. My son, my firstborn, the child I had carried, fed, and raised. He was wearing a dark jacket, a baseball cap, his hands in his pockets. He stopped in front of room 307 and took out his cell phone. He typed something. 30 seconds later, Diana appeared at the other end of the hallway. They met in front of the door. They talked. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw the tension in their gestures. Michael pointed toward the door. Diana shook her head. He persisted. She finally nodded. They entered together. This time they were inside for 8 minutes. When they left, Michael looked nervously up and down the hall while Diana put something in her purse. Something small, a bottle perhaps, a syringe. They went in opposite directions, as if they didn't know each other, as if they weren't married, as if they hadn't just left the same room where my husband lay helpless. I stopped the video, got up from the chair, walked to the bathroom, and vomited everything in my stomach, which wasn't much. I had barely eaten in days. I looked in the mirror. A 67-year-old woman stared back at me, gray hair tied back in a messy bun, deep dark circles, pale skin, wrinkled clothes she'd been wearing since yesterday. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago, but in my eyes there was something new, something hard, something dangerous. I went back to the computer. I needed to see everything. Every second, every entry, every exit. There were more videos. In the one from October 19th, Diana spent 20 minutes inside the room. In the one from the 20th, she came back in at 4 a.m., when the hospital is most sleepy, when fewer nurses roam the hallways. Every night since Henry's stroke. And on 3 of those nights, Michael stood guard outside. Tears began to fall uncontrollably. They weren't tears of sadness, they were of pure rage, of betrayal, of a pain so deep it had no name. My son, my own son. The doorbell rang. I violently wiped my face and went to open it, ready to face whatever it was. It was Michael. He was standing on the threshold with that smile I'd known since he was born, the same smile he used as a child when he was playing tricks. Only now I knew that behind that smile lived a monster. "Mom, are you okay?" "You haven't answered my messages." I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to push him. I wanted to ask him how he could be doing this, but I held back because something in me knew if I showed my hand now, I'd lose the game. "I'm tired, Michael. I just came to shower and change." He tried to come in. I took a step, blocking the entrance. "You better rest well, Mom. I'm staying with Dad today." Of course he wanted to stay. Of course he wanted to continue to control the situation. "No, I'll be back in an hour." "Mom, you haven't slept in days. Let me help you." I said no. My voice sounded harsher than I meant to. I saw a flash in his eyes. Surprise, maybe suspicion. "Okay," he said finally, raising his hands. "Whatever you want, but if you need anything..." "What I need is for my husband to wake up. Can you give me that, Michael?" Something changed in his expression. Something dark crossed his face for a fraction of a second before he put the mask back on. "We all want that, Mom. We're all worried." He left. I watched him get into his new truck, a late-model Toyota. How much had it cost? 300,000 pesos? 400,000? Where had he gotten the money to buy it? I locked the door, 2 locks, the security chain, something I never did during the day. I went back to the computer, copied all the videos to my cell phone to a new USB drive to the cloud. I wasn't going to lose this evidence. Then I called the family lawyer, Mr. Victor Adams, a 60-year-old man who had drawn up all our contracts for 20 years. "Amelia, how are you?" "Henry, I need to see you today. It's urgent. Did something happen with the business?" "Something much worse." "Maybe in 2 hours," I heard hesitation. "I'll be in my office later." I arrived on time. Mr. Adams welcomed me into his office, lined with law books and diplomas on the walls. He offered me coffee, which I declined. I couldn't drink anything. My stomach was still burning. I showed him the videos. His face, normally calm and professional, was breaking down with each passing second. When the last one ended, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "My God, Amelia, this is attempted murder." The words hung in the air between us. Attempted murder, my son, my daughter-in-law, trying to kill my husband. What can I do? "You need to go to the police right now with these videos and the serum analysis you mentioned." "What if it's not enough? What if they say the videos don't prove anything because you can't see what he's doing inside the room?" He sighed. He leaned back in his leather chair. "Then you need more. You need to catch them in the act, with witnesses, with irrefutable evidence." "How?" He looked at me with that expression that tells you you're about to hear something you don't want to hear. "You have to let them try again and be ready to document everything." I spent the rest of the day planning. I called Dr. Samuel Harris and explained everything to him. At first, he flatly refused. Too dangerous, too risky. But when I showed him the videos, his face hardened. "Okay, I'll do it, but on one condition. The police have to be involved right away. We need legal protection." I called the police, not the local station, but a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit who had investigated a fraud case at our company years before. An upright, incorruptible man. Detective Raymond Cooper arrived at the hospital that night, tall, with a bushy mustache and eyes that let nothing pass. I showed him everything. The videos, the serum analysis, the bank records I had begun reviewing, which showed strange transfers from the business accounts. He scratched his mustache while thinking, "This is enough for an investigation, but for arrests, I need to see them do it with my own eyes." That's what we're going to give him." That night, I stayed at the hospital in room 307, the lights off, sitting in the chair next to Henry, holding his cold hand. Detective Cooper was hiding in the bathroom. Dr. Samuel Harris was in his office, ready to come in seconds, and I waited. I waited for my own family to come and try to kill the man who had been my entire life. The clock read 2:15 a.m. when I heard the key in the lock. Because sometimes, to catch a monster, you have to let it get close enough to look it in the eye. The door opened slowly, too slowly, as if whoever entered knew exactly how to keep the hinges from squeaking. I sank into the chair, pretending to sleep. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would give me away. I heard soft footsteps, 2 people. I recognized Diana's perfume before I saw her, that sweet vanilla scent she always wore, the one I'd once found pleasant and now made me nauseous. "She's asleep," Michael whispered. "It seems so, but hurry." I opened my eyes, just a crack, just enough to see. Diana approached the 4th, took a small bottle out of her bag, and uncapped it with precise professional movements, the movements of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. "Are you sure about the dosage?" Michael asked nervously, looking toward the door. "Don't worry, with this, he won't wake up until it's too late." She inserted the needle into the IV port. I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up. The chair fell back with a crash that echoed in the room. "Stop!" Diana jumped. The bottle almost fell from her hands. Michael turned white as a sheet. I literally saw the blood drain from his face. "Mom," he stammered. "Me? Us? What are you doing?" My voice cracked, heavy with all the pain I'd been holding in for days. "What are you doing to your father?" Diana regained her composure faster than Michael. She was always the colder of the two. She quickly stuffed the bottle into her bag and looked at me with those green eyes that now looked like ice. "Mrs. Amelia, I think you're confused. We just came to see how he was doing." "Liar!" I yelled. I didn't care anymore if I woke up the whole apartment. "I saw you. I saw what you were going to do." Michael approached with his hands raised as if I were a wild animal that needed to be calmed. "Mom, please, you're upset. You haven't slept well in days." "Don't talk to me like I'm crazy." Tears started to fall. I couldn't stop them. "You're my son. My son, Michael. How can you do this to your own father?" Something changed in his expression. The mask of concern fell away, and what remained underneath terrified me more than everything that had come before. "Because he's taking everything from us," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "He changed the will. Mom left us out. After all we've worked." "Worked?" The laughter that came out of me sounded hysterical. "Worked stealing from the company? Worked up to your neck in debt? Worked killing your father?" Diana took a step forward. Her eyes glittered dangerously. "Her husband is a stubborn old man who won't let go of control. He's already lived his life. He's had his chance. Now it's our turn." "Our turn?" I repeated incredulously. "Our turn to what? To inherit over his dead body?" "If he wakes up," Michael intervened, and his voice sounded desperate, "now he's going to change everything again. He's going to sue me. He's going to take away my access to the accounts. He's going to leave us with nothing. Because you deserve it. Because you stole." Michael looked at me with something I never thought I'd see in my son's eyes: contempt. "You were always like him, controlling, clinging to money as if it were yours. You never wanted to give us our share." "We gave you everything," I whispered, and every word hurt like a knife. "We gave you education, opportunities, love. We gave you the business, and this is how you repay us?" "You gave us crumbs," Diana spat, "a miserable salary while you keep millions, while you live in your big house, while we barely make ends meet. You live in a house worth 3 million pesos that we gave you as a down payment." The scream came from the depths of my being, from 40 years of sacrifice, of working early mornings, of calloused hands and aching back, of building something from nothing so that my children would have a future. And this was my future, seeing my son willing to kill for money. Diana took out her cell phone. "I'll call security. We'll say he's having a psychotic episode, that he's attacking me." "Go ahead," I said, wiping my tears angrily. "Call, because I too have something to show them." I took out my cell phone and opened the video folder. I have recordings of every night they came in here. I have the serum analysis showing benzodiazepines. I have proof of everything. I saw the panic cross their faces. Finally, they were finally afraid. "Are you lying?" Diana said, but her voice trembled. "Do you want to bet your freedom on that?" Michael snatched the cell phone from my hands. He did it with such force that it scraped my palm. "Give me that, Michael! Let me go!" We struggled. My own son, the baby I had breastfed, the child I had cured of fevers and nightmares. Now he was hurting me to protect his secret. The door burst open. Detective Cooper entered with 2 uniformed officers. Dr. Samuel Harris followed. "Everyone stay still." Michael let go of me as if my skin was burning. Diana tried to run toward the exit. An officer blocked her way. "Diana Moore and Michael Roberts are under arrest for attempted murder and tampering with medications." "This is a misunderstanding," Diana cried. "She's sick. She's making things up." The detective held up a small recorder that had been in his pocket the whole time. Copies of the videos were already filed with the prosecutor's office and the hospital, so nothing could go missing. We have everything recorded, every word, including the part where he admits to poisoning the patient. I saw them put the handcuffs on. I saw them read his rights. I saw my son look at me with pure hatred as they led him out of the room. "This is your fault," he spat at me. "You always ruin everything." And those were the last words my son spoke to me that night. I collapsed against the wall. My legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. Dr. Samuel Harris helped me sit up before I fell to the floor. "It's okay, Mrs. Amelia." It wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. I had just sent my own son to jail. I had just discovered that the child I had raised was capable of killing. How is a mother supposed to recover from that? I approached Henry, took his hand. It was still cold, still unconscious, but now at least he was safe. "It's over, my love," I whispered. "You're safe now." But I wasn't. A part of me had died that night in room 307. The part that believed family was sacred, that blood was unbreakable. Because discovering that your son would rather see you destroyed than lose money, that's a kind of death no funeral can close. The sun rose over Puebla as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't completely collapsed in the last few hours. I stayed in the hospital. I didn't have the strength to go home. I didn't want to be in that empty space where every photo on the wall would remind me of what I had lost. At 8 a.m., the calls started. First, it was Lauren. Her voice sounded upset, confused, furious. "Mom, what did you do?" Michael called me from the police station. "He says he was arrested, that you accused him of trying to kill Dad. Tell me it's not true." I stayed silent. What could I say? How could I explain to my daughter that her brother was capable of that? "Mom, talk to me. What's happening?" "It's true, Lauren. It's all true." "No, no, no, no. Michael never." Her voice broke. "You're confused. The stress, the lack of sleep. I have videos. I have proof. I have their own words admitting what they were doing." A long silence. Labored breathing on the other end. "I can't believe you're doing this." "He's your son, Mom. Your son. How can you do this to him?" Every word was a knife. "How can I? How can I, Lauren? They were killing your father. Did you want me to stay silent? You should have found another solution. Talk to them, something. But no, not to destroy the family like that. I didn't destroy anything. Michael did it when he decided to poison his father. I don't want to talk to you now. I can't." And she hung up. I stared at the phone. My daughter, my only daughter, had just hung up on me. 15 minutes later, Ryan called. My youngest son, always the calmest, the mediator, the one who tried to keep the peace. But that morning, his voice held no peace. "Mom, I need you to explain to me what the hell is going on." Lauren is crying hysterically. Michael is in custody. "You've lost your mind." "Ryan, please, I need you to listen to me." "No, Mom, just listen to me. I know you're going through a lot with Dad. I know you're tired. But accusing Michael of attempted murder, do you realize what that means? It means your brother and sister-in-law were giving your father drugs so he wouldn't wake up. And when I found them, they tried to make me look crazy. Diana is a nurse, Mom. Maybe she just wanted to help. Diana never finished her degree, and what she was giving him wasn't help, it was poison. Do you have real evidence or just suspicions? Real evidence. After everything I had gathered, I have videos, lab tests, testimonies. Then you're wrong about something. There has to be an explanation. Michael isn't a murderer. I didn't want to believe it either, Ryan, but the facts are that you sent your son to jail, and that, Mom, is unforgivable. He hung up too. I sat there, holding the phone as if it weighed 100 kilograms. My 3 children, the 3 I had given birth to, raised, loved with every fiber of my being. 2 of them had just turned their backs on me. The 3rd was in a cell, hating me. The door to the room opened. A social worker walked in, a young woman in her 30s with a tablet in her hands and a professional expression. Mrs. Roberts, I need to ask you some questions about the minors. It took me a second to process. The minors? Michael and Diana Moore's children, Matthew 7 and Sophie 5. With both parents detained, we need to know who will take care of them. My grandchildren. My God, my grandchildren. I'll take care of them. The worker checked something on her tablet. There's a request from the Moore family. Mrs. Diana's parents are asking for temporary custody. What? No. They barely know them. We are Mrs. Roberts. She interrupted me in a soft but firm voice. You are the one who filed the charges against the children's parents. The judge could consider a conflict of interest. Those children are my blood. I have cared for them since they were born. I understand, but you will have to go through the corresponding legal process. For now, the children will remain in the temporary custody of their maternal grandparents. I felt the floor open beneath my feet. He's telling me I can't even see them? He can request supervised visits, but that will also depend on the judge. He left, leaving me with a piece of paper full of legal terms that I could barely read because my tears blurred everything. They took my grandchildren away from me, Matthew, who called me Abu and asked me to read him stories before bed, Sophie, who hugged my neck so tight I could hardly breathe. The phone vibrated again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Roberts, this is Christina Bennett from Channel 8 Noticias. We heard about your son's arrest. Could you give us a statement? I hung up. 2 minutes later, another number, another journalist, then another. The news was out. Textile businessman arrested for attempted murder of his father. The headlines must have been everywhere. I turned off my phone and approached Henry. He was still asleep, still didn't know any of this, and a selfish part of me was grateful that he didn't have to see what had happened. Did I do the right thing? I asked him out loud. Henry, did I do the right thing? Silence, only the beep of the monitor. I lost our children, our grandchildren. I lost everything, saving you, and I don't even know if you can hear me. I rested my forehead against his hand. It was warmer than yesterday. It was something. Something small, but something. The door opened again. This time it was Attorney Adams. Amelia, I came as soon as I found out. I sat up, wiping my face quickly. It's already been on the news, all over it. And there's something else you need to know. He sat down in the other chair. Diana's parents hired one of the best criminal attorneys in the state. They're going to fight this with everything. Let them fight. I have proof. You have it, but they also have money for a good defense, and they're going to use everything against you. They're going to paint you as a resentful mother-in-law, as a confused older woman who misinterpreted acts of love. That's a lie. I know, but they're going to create reasonable doubt, and I need you to be prepared for what's coming. What was coming? A trial. Testimony. Michael standing before me in court. My other children probably testifying on his behalf. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted. It was the first time I'd said it out loud. The lawyer put a hand on my shoulder. You can and you will, because if you don't, those people will walk free and try again. He was right. Of course he was right. But that afternoon, sitting alone in that hospital room with my unconscious husband and my devastated family, I felt more alone than I've ever felt in my life. Because sometimes doing the right thing means being completely alone, and it hurts more than you ever imagined anything could hurt. 3 days passed. 3 days in which I didn't receive a single call from my children. 3 days watching Henry day and night, terrified that someone else would come and finish what Michael and Diana started. Dr. Samuel Harris had ordered a change of the entire IV to cleanse Henry's system, but the damage was already done. The benzodiazepines had been accumulating in his body for days. He needs time, the doctor explained. His brain is struggling to wake up, but the medication keeps it suppressed. It could take days, maybe weeks. Weeks that I would spend alone. On the fourth night, when the shift changed and the hospital grew quieter, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I was going to ignore it, but something made me answer it. Mrs. Amelia. It was a nervous woman's voice, almost whispering. Who's speaking? This is Lisa, the nurse. I need to see you. I have something you need to know. My heart leapt. Where are you? Hospital cafeteria in 20 minutes, and ma'am, come alone. She hung up before I could ask more. I looked at Henry. I hated leaving him alone, even for 5 minutes, but something in Lisa's voice told me this was important. I asked a nurse on duty to watch the room. I gave her my number. If anyone who isn't a doctor tries to come in, she'll call me immediately. I went downstairs. The cafeteria was almost empty at that hour. Just 2 doctors at a table in the back and a cleaning lady mopping. Lisa was in the far corner. She was wearing a cap, sunglasses, even though we were inside, and a jacket that covered her neck. She looked like someone on the run. I sat across from her. Her hands were wrapped around a glass of coffee that was clearly already cold. Thanks for coming, she said, without looking me in the eye. What happened, Lisa? Are you okay? She finally looked up. There was a bruise on her cheek, yellowish for several days. Who did that to you? It doesn't matter. What matters is this. She took a manila envelope out of her backpack and slid it across the table. After they fired me, I continued investigating because I knew something wasn't right. I opened the envelope. There were documents, printouts, medical records. What is this? Pharmacy records for the last 14 months. Every prescription drug purchase made with prescriptions in the names of doctors at this hospital. I started looking. There were dozens of pages, hundreds of transactions. I don't understand. Look at page 17, the prescription signed by Dr. George Wilson. I looked. There it was, a long shopping list. Clonazepam, diazepam, lorazepam, all benzodiazepines, all in large quantities. And Dr. Wilson died 2 years ago. Someone was using his signature to illegally buy drugs. My blood ran cold. Who? Lisa pulled out another sheet of paper, a copy of a pharmacy card. The name on the ID read, Diana Moore. Your daughter-in-law worked for 6 months in the hospital pharmacy 3 years ago. No one remembered her name until I started asking, but she had access to the doctor's stamps, the prescriptions, everything. My hands shook holding that paper. This means she's been planning this for years, or worse, she's done it before. I leaned back in my chair. My head was spinning. She did it before. Who? Lisa took a deep breath, as if preparing to say something terrible. I investigated her daughter-in-law's family. Her maternal father-in-law died 4 years ago, supposedly from a cardiac arrest during the night. In a hospital, Diana was his only nighttime visitor. I felt nauseous. And the entire inheritance went to Diana's mother, who curiously transferred 500,000 pesos to her daughter 2 months later. My God, this was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't the first time. Diana had killed before and gotten away with it. Why are you telling me all this? You could get in trouble. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. Because I need someone to believe me. When my mother died, I tried to tell them. I tried to investigate, but no one listened. They called me crazy. They threatened me. She touched the bruise on her cheek. My brother did this. He told me that if I kept talking, it would get worse. I took her hand on the table. I'm so sorry, Lisa. No one should have to go through that. But you did believe me, and you have the power to do something. Please don't let her get away with it. Not again. I put the documents in my bag. I can keep these. I made copies. Those are yours. I also included the contacts of 2 pharmacy employees who remember Diana. They're willing to testify if you protect them. Detective Cooper will contact them, I promise. Lisa stood up to leave. I stood up too and hugged her. She clung to me like a lifeline. Thank you. I whispered. "You're braver than you think." "I'm not brave. I'm afraid all the time, but fear can't always win. Sometimes you have to do the right thing, even if it costs you everything." She left through the back door. I watched her disappear into the night and prayed that she was safe. Months later, I learned that Lisa had been rehired at another hospital. When she called to tell me, she said with a laugh, "Sometimes telling the truth does pay off." I returned to room 307 with the envelope clutched to my chest. This evidence changed everything. It wasn't just the attempt with Henry anymore. It was a pattern. It was premeditated. It was enough to ensure that Diana would never hurt anyone again. I called Detective Cooper. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Roberts, it's 11 p.m. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. I have new evidence. Diana has done this before, and I can prove it." Silence. "Then I'll be at your hospital at 7 o'clock. That night, I slept a little better. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone, that there were good people willing to help, even if it cost them. People like Lisa, who lost everything for telling the truth. And I wasn't going to waste her sacrifice, because justice doesn't always come from where you expect it. Sometimes it comes from the most broken places, from the most wounded people who understand better than anyone what it means to fight. Detective Cooper arrived on time. I received him in the hospital waiting room with 2 coffees and the manila envelope that Lisa had given me. He reviewed every document in silence. His expression darkened with each page. When he finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "This is pure gold, Mrs. Amelia. With this, we can prove that your daughter-in-law has a pattern, that your husband's actions weren't an emotional outburst, but something calculated. It's enough to keep them out of bail. It's enough to request that bail be denied due to flight risk and dangerousness. But I need more." "More? What more do you want?" He leaned forward. "I need to know the full motive. Why now? Why your husband specifically? There has to be a financial reason. He was right. This was all about money. It always had been." "I'm going to hire a private detective, someone to review Michael and Diana's finances. I already have one in mind, the best in Puebla, discreet and fast." 2 days later, the private detective, a thin man named Scott Daniels, called me to his office, a small place downtown with walls full of filing cabinets and a computer that looked like a museum piece. "Mrs. Roberts, I found several interesting things." He opened a thick folder. "Let's start with your daughter-in-law." He placed in front of me printed bank statements. "Diana Moore has debts of 320,000 pesos, mainly from online betting houses, 3 credit cards maxed out, and 2 personal loans that she hasn't paid in 4 months. 320,000 pesos. I felt the air leave my lungs. Michael knows. "That's what's interesting. The movement suggests so. Look at these transfers." He pointed to a line. "His son has been sending him money every 2 weeks, varying amounts between 20 and 50,000 pesos. Where does Michael get this money from?" Scott Daniels took out more papers. His expression was grave. "From the family business. I've tracked the accounts. Your son has access to a corporate account that handles operating expenses. In the last 14 months, he has diverted 2,100,000. The world stopped. 2,100,000 exactly. He did it in small amounts, 10,000 here, 20,000 there. He created false invoices from suppliers for services that were never provided, low enough not to raise alarms in routine audits. Tears began to fall. I couldn't stop them. My son, the son we had put in charge of the administration, the one who promised to take care of the family legacy, had been stealing from us for over a year. Henry knew it. Scott Daniels nodded slowly. Your husband hired his own auditors 2 months ago. They found the irregularities. I have the communications. He took out more paperwork. Your husband was going to file a formal complaint. The day before the spill, he had an appointment with his lawyer to sign the documents. Everything fit together. Henry discovered the theft. He was going to report Michael, and the stress of that decision, reporting his own son, caused the stroke. Why didn't he tell me? According to his lawyer's notes, your husband wanted to protect you. He planned to resolve this legally, recover the money, and only then tell you. Typical of Henry, always trying to shoulder the difficult problems alone. Is there anything else? Scott Daniels continued. I found your husband's amended will, the change he made 2 years ago. I braced myself. What does it say? He completely disinherited Michael. Everything is divided between you, Lauren, and Ryan. Michael receives only a trust of 200,000 pesos for his children, nothing more. 200,000 of a fortune of 47 million. Michael knew, I murmured. Somehow he found out. Probably, he said, and that's his motive. If your husband died, they could challenge the will, claiming it was made under duress or in an altered state of mind. With you devastated by the loss, vulnerable, perhaps they could reach an agreement. But if Henry woke up, he would confirm that the will was valid and would also press fraud charges. Michael would lose everything and face prison. That's why they needed to keep him from waking up. That's why Diana came in every night with her syringes. That's why the constant poison. I left that office with a cold certainty in my chest. There was no more doubt. There was no more room for denial. My son had tried to murder his father for money, and I had all the evidence. Detective Cooper presented everything to the judge: Lisa's documents, the bank records, the audits, the will, and Michael and Diana's bail request was denied. They would remain in custody until trial. But there was another battle to fight. Attorney Adams summoned me to his office. "Amelia, we need to talk about the company. With Michael out and Henry incapacitated, someone has to take control. You're a co-owner. You have every right. But we need to act quickly. The suppliers are nervous. The employees are scared. If we don't show stability, the business could collapse." That afternoon, I walked into the main office for the first time in years. Henry had always handled this. I was in charge of design and creativity, but now I gathered the managers, 20 people who had worked with us for decades. Their faces showed concern, fear of losing their jobs. "I know these have been difficult days," I began. "I know the rumors have circulated, so I'll be direct." I told them everything: the fraud, the embezzled money, the fake invoices Michael had created. "We're going to recover every peso. We're going to audit everything, and we're going to emerge from this stronger." One of the managers, Mr. Raymond Clark, who had been with us for 30 years, raised his hand. "Mrs. Amelia, everyone here is with you. Just tell us what you need." I felt a lump in my throat. I need them to trust me, like they trusted Henry, like they trusted when we were just two young people with a dream. That night, I returned to the hospital exhausted, but with something resembling hope. I had taken control. I had protected the legacy. I sat next to Henry, took his hand. "I'm doing it, my love. I'm fighting for us, for what we built, and I won't let anyone take that away from us." His fingers moved barely, almost imperceptibly, but they moved. "Henry," I whispered, leaning in, "do you hear me?" Nothing more. But it was enough. It was a sign that inside my husband was still fighting, and I would continue fighting too. Because sometimes revenge isn't shouting, it's working in silence, putting every piece together, and winning the game before the other person realizes they've already lost. 6 more days passed. 6 days of cleaning up the company's finances. 6 days of calls with lawyers, meetings with auditors, documents that never ended. 6 days in which Henry remained motionless in that bed, but I had learned to see the small signs. His eyelids sometimes trembled when I spoke to him. His fingers twitched when I squeezed his hand. He was there, fighting to return. Dr. Samuel Harris checked his vital signs every morning. "His brain is responding better. The benzodiazepines are leaving his system. It's a matter of time. Time, always time." On the morning of the 15th day, something changed. It was 6:30. I was reading the newspaper to him out loud, as I did every morning. A silly habit, perhaps, but I needed him to hear my voice, to know I was there. "And in local news, the price of tomatoes went up again. Your favorite salad is going to cost a fortune, my love." His fingers squeezed mine. I dropped the newspaper. My heart raced. "Henry." His eyelids trembled. Slowly, so slowly I thought I was imagining it, they opened. He looked at me. His brown eyes, those eyes I knew better than my own, looked at me with confusion, with effort, but they looked at me. "Henry, my love, you're awake." "You're awake." The tears fell uncontrollably. Wait, don't move. I'm going to call the doctor. I pressed the emergency button. In seconds, the room was filled with doctors and nurses. They moved me aside while they checked his signs, his reflexes, his blood pressure. Dr. Samuel Harris smiled. A genuine smile lit up his tired face. "Mr. Roberts, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand." Henry squeezed. "Excellent. Can you say your name?" Henry's lips moved. It came out as barely a hoarse whisper, raspy from days of disuse. "Henry." "Henry!" I cried harder. I had done it. He had woken up. The doctors ran more tests. They checked that he could move both legs, both arms. They checked his vision, his immediate memory. Everything was working. He would need therapy to regain strength, but his brain was fine. When they finally left us alone, I sat on the edge of the bed and took his hand in both of mine. "I thought I had lost you." Henry looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. "Amelia," every word was hard. "Michael," he realized. Even after days of being unconscious, he knew. "Shh, don't talk yet. Rest." But he shook his head, gripped my hand tighter. "I have to say," he took a deep breath, "I figured out the money. 2 million. I know, my love. I know everything." His eyes widened. Surprise, fear. "How?" "Because they tried to kill you, Henry, and I wasn't going to sit idly by. I told him everything, the videos, the poison serum, the arrest, the evidence I had gathered. Every word seemed to hit him like a punch. When I finished, tears were streaming down his cheeks. "My son," he whispered brokenly. "Our son. He is no longer the child we raised. I don't know what he became, but I couldn't let him hurt you." Henry closed his eyes. The pain on his face was unbearable. It wasn't physical pain. It was the pain of a father who has just discovered that his son tried to kill him. "I did wrong," he finally said. "I should have told you." "No, you protected me. It doesn't matter anymore. The important thing is that you're alive, and we're going to get through this." 2 hours later, Detective Cooper entered the room, accompanied by a notary public. They needed Henry's official statement. My husband, still weak, still struggling to speak, told everything in a broken voice. He explained how he discovered the irregularities in the accounts 2 months ago, how he hired external auditors without anyone knowing, how he confirmed that Michael had embezzled 2,100,000 pesos. "I was going to report him," he said, "that day, the day of the stroke." "Why that day specifically?" the detective asked. "Because I found this." With trembling hands, he took his cell phone out of the side table, searched through his emails, and showed one. Michael asked for access to the main account, the large one, 50 million. The air left the room. 50 million, I repeated it. He said he needed to make an urgent investment, but I already knew. I knew he was going to steal everything. That was the final straw, not just the 2 million. Michael wanted everything. He wanted to empty us completely. I told him no, Henry continued. I told him I knew what he'd done, that I was going to report him. What did he say? Henry's face fell. He called me a selfish old man. He said I'd had him under control his whole life, that it was time for him to let go of power. He took a shaky breath. And then I felt sick. My chest tightened, and I don't remember anything else. The stress of the confrontation with his son caused the stroke. And then, as he lay unconscious, vulnerable, that same son tried to make sure he never woke up. The notary public certified every word. The detective recorded everything. It was irrefutable evidence. I need you to analyze the serum, Henry added suddenly. I know Diana studied nursing. I never trusted her. We already did, I said gently. It was full of benzodiazepines. They kept you sedated. Henry closed his eyes. A tear rolled down onto the pillow. My son wanted to kill me. There was no answer to that. There were no words that could make that pain any less. The detective got up to leave. With this statement, the case is closed. They'll go to trial, and with all the evidence we have, they'll get the maximum sentence. When everyone left, I lay down on the bed next to Henry, something I'd never done, but I needed to feel him close, alive, real. We lost Michael, he whispered. We lost him a long time ago. We just didn't realize it. The grandchildren, we're going to fight for them. When you're stronger, when all this is over, we're going to bring them back. Henry hugged me with the little strength he had, and there in that hospital bed, after 2 weeks of nightmares, I finally felt we could breathe. The worst danger had passed. Now justice came. Because waking up isn't just about opening your eyes. It's about facing a truth I'd rather continue sleeping to avoid. The trial began 3 months later. 3 months in which Henry underwent physical therapy and regained almost all of his mobility. 3 months in which we rebuilt the company, recovered the stolen money by selling the properties that were in Michael's name. 3 months in which I didn't see my grandchildren. The courtroom was full. Journalists, curious onlookers, employees of our company who came to support us. And in the front row, on the other side, Diana's parents stared at me with pure hatred. Michael entered first, handcuffed, dressed in the orange prison uniform. He had lost weight and had dark circles under his eyes. When his eyes met mine, I didn't see regret. I saw resentment. Diana entered later, still beautiful, still with that pose of superiority, as if this were a temporary inconvenience, as if she had some hidden card. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented the videos one by one. The entire courtroom saw them enter the room at night. They saw Diana with her syringes. They saw Michael standing guard. They presented the serum analysis, the benzodiazepine needles, the accumulated lethal amounts. Lisa's testimony was presented. She took the stand trembling, but with a firm voice she told everything. How she saw Diana change the serum, how she got fired for speaking out. They presented the pharmacy records, the forged prescriptions, the purchasing pattern over the years. They even showed a previous case in which a relative of Diana's had died under similar circumstances. The pattern was impossible to deny. And they presented the full audit. Every peso stolen, every false invoice, the 2,100,000 pesos misappropriated in 14 months. Diana's lawyer tried to create doubt. He said she only wanted to help, that the medications were to calm Henry's anxiety, that it was all a misunderstanding. But when the prosecutor asked him why he would do it in the early hours of the morning, without medical authorization, using stolen keys, he had no answer. Michael's lawyer tried to paint him as a victim, a son manipulated by an ambitious wife, a man with a gambling problem who made mistakes but never wanted to hurt anyone. Then the prosecutor showed the text messages between Michael and Diana from the weeks before Henry's stroke. "I can't stand my father anymore. He controls everything. When he's gone, everything will be ours. And if he doesn't leave soon, there are ways to speed things up." The room fell silent. Then came the messages after the stroke. How much longer? A few more nights. It must seem natural. And if your mom suspects, we'll make her look crazy. No one will believe her. I saw Michael sink in his chair. I saw Diana finally lose that mask of control. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand, my legs shaking. The defense attorney attacked me immediately. "Mrs. Roberts, isn't it true that you always had problems with your daughter-in-law?" I tried to accept her. She never let me. "Isn't it true that you're controlling with your family?" Caring isn't controlling. "Isn't it true that you made all this up? You couldn't accept that your son had started his own family?" I got up from the chair. The judge asked me to sit down, but I needed to say it. "My son tried to kill my husband. I have videos. I have evidence. I have his own words. And if you think a mother makes something like that up out of jealousy, then you don't understand anything about a mother's love." The judge banged the gavel, but I saw approval in his eyes. Henry testified at the end. He entered the stand still with a cane, still weak, but with his dignity intact. He told everything. The discovery of the robbery, the confrontation with Michael, the stroke, waking up knowing that his son had wanted him not to do it. "Do you have something to say to your son?" the prosecutor asked. Henry looked Michael straight in the eyes. For the first time in the trial, Michael couldn't meet his gaze. "I gave you everything. I taught you everything. And in return, you tried to take my life, not out of necessity, out of ambition." His voice broke. "I don't recognize you. The son I raised died long ago, and I had to accept it." Michael bowed his head. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was absolutely silent. In the case of the state against Diana Moore, we found her guilty of attempted first-degree murder, forgery of documents, and illegal practice of medicine. Diana screamed. Her parents cried. The officers had to restrain her while she cursed the jury, the judge, everyone. In the case of the state against Michael Roberts, we found him guilty of aiding and abetting attempted murder, corporate fraud, and money laundering. Michael said nothing. He just closed his eyes. The sentence arrived a week later. Diana, 12 years in prison with no possibility of a sentence reduction. Michael, 8 years in prison, plus full restitution of the 2,100,000 pesos. The court ordered the immediate return of the money to the company. Every peso was recovered in less than 6 months. We left the courthouse holding hands, Henry and I, like when we were young and the whole world was against us, but we had each other. Attorney Adams escorted us to the exit. He had handled the case from beginning to end, like a soldier of the law who doesn't accept half-truths. The journalists surrounded us. Flashes, shouted questions, microphones in our faces. "How do you feel, Mrs. Roberts?" I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. I had won the case, but I had lost my son. I feel grateful that there is justice, and sad for what could have been and never will be. 3 weeks later, we won custody of Matthew and Sophie. Diana's parents fought. They said we were too old, that the children needed youth. But the judge saw the bank accounts, saw that the Moores lived on loans. He saw that we had been the primary caregivers of those children since birth. Custody was granted to the paternal grandparents. The afternoon we brought them home, Matthew asked, "Grandpa, when are Mom and Dad coming back?" Henry knelt before him, took his hands. "They're going to be gone for a long time, champ. They did bad things, but we're going to take care of you and we'll never, ever abandon you." Sophie hugged my leg. "We can stay forever?" "Forever, my love." It took months for Lauren and Ryan to call me back. Time and public trials showed them the truth, but family wounds don't heal with sentences. That night, while the children were asleep, Henry and I sat on the terrace, the same one where we celebrated birthdays, where we planned the future. "We lost a son," he said, "but we saved 2 grandchildren and each other." He took my hand. 43 years together, and you still surprise me. Why? Because when everything fell apart, you didn't give up. You fought like you always have. 3 years later, on our 46th anniversary, we received a letter from prison. It was from Michael. "Mom, Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Every day I regret it. Every day I wish I could turn back time. Matthew and Sophie are fine. Can I see them?" Henry read it silently. He looked at me. "What do you say?" I thought about everything, the pain, the betrayal, but also about those 2 children who asked for their father. Once a month with supervision. For them, not for him. And so we did. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the poison of the past poison the future. I learned that true family isn't just blood, it's loyalty. It's being there when everything falls apart. It's Lisa risking her job. It's Mr. Adams fighting tirelessly. It's Henry waking up and choosing to live. And I learned that sometimes saving a life means breaking up a family so we can rebuild it honestly. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Like if you think I did the right thing, and subscribe, because here we'll continue sharing stories of women who refuse to stay silent. Because true strength isn't in never falling, it's in getting back up every time, even if everything and everyone tells you to stay down. I learned that some wounds don't heal, they just stop bleeding with time. But as long as there is love and truth, there is always life after the pain.